It's 3 a.m. You're in a helium headspace. It's Wednesday, the 1st of October, 2025. A Bronx Tale premiered on this day in 1993, directed by Robert De Niro. Starring Chaz Palminteri, Joe Pesci, and Robert De Niro, who as the father character laments, "He's wrong. It don't take much strength to pull a trigger, but try getting up every morning, day after day, and work for a living. Let him try that. Then we'll see who the real tough guy is. The working man is the tough guy. Your father's the tough guy." Adjusted for inflation, it made $8.3 million its opening weekend and has since made $38.8 million. Walter Matthau was born on this day in 1920 in New York City and grew into one of Hollywood's most distinctive actors. An unlikely leading man with a face full of character and a voice as dry as the humor he delivered. He didn't trade on glamour or polish, but on an unmatched timing that turned grouchiness into charm. His partnership with Jack Lemmon, especially in The Odd Couple, cemented him as the embodiment of the comic everyman who stumbles into wisdom by accident. Matthau could be sly, cranky, or oddly endearing, and his career stretched from Broadway to Oscar-winning film performances, showing that charisma isn't always smooth. It can be rough-hewn, sharp-edged, and unforgettable. Walter Matthau once said, "I like people too much to be cynical, I just sound like it." Today in 1910, a massive explosion destroyed the Los Angeles Times building in the city's downtown area, killing 21 and injuring many more. Since Los Angeles Times publisher Harrison Otis, a virulent opponent of unions, believed that the bomb was directed at him, he hired the nation's premier private detective, William J. Burns, to crack the case. In addition to printing numerous editorials against unions, Otis was the leader of the Merchants and Manufacturing Association, a powerful group of business owners with extensive political connections. Burns's investigation led him to the Bridge and Structural Iron Workers Union and their treasurer, John J. McNamara. In April of 1911, after Burns got a confession out of Ordie McManacle, who had allegedly been the intermediary between McNamara and two bomb experts, he personally arrested John McNamara and his brother in Indiana. Without any legal authority, Burns also managed to get the brothers to California, where they were to be prosecuted. Union members and left-wing supporters rallied around the McNamara brothers. After a large defense fund was raised, Union representatives pleaded with Clarence Darrow to take the case. Darrow, who was the best defense attorney America had to offer, had already gotten Big Bill Haywood, the Union leader of the industrial workers of the world, off on murder charges in Idaho a few years earlier. Offered $50,000, he reluctantly took the case. Even though public opinion supported the McNamaras, Darrow's own investigation was turning up evidence to prove that the brothers were actually guilty. Even worse, members of the defense team were trying to bribe the jury just to keep up with the prosecution's own bribery tactics. Darrow worked out a deal with Otis and the prosecutors that the brothers would plead guilty to escape the death penalty, which they did. Nevertheless, this resolution was not satisfactory to either side, and Darrow got caught in the middle. Otis arranged for Darrow's prosecution on bribery charges, and the Union deserted the great defense lawyer. Not only did they refuse to pay his fee for the McNamara case, they refused to assist in his defense. Earl Rogers, a notorious drunk, but also a brash, formidable, and effective Los Angeles attorney, was the man to take Darrow's case. After a long trial, Rogers secured a mistrial for Darrow, who was later acquitted on a second trial. Darrow went on to try such cases as the Leopold and Loeb murder trial and the Scopes monkey trial. It's the 111th birthday of the man who said the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. Daniel J. Boorstin, who grew into one of America's most influential historians of ideas. His career stretched across teaching, writing, and eventually serving as the Librarian of Congress, but what set him apart was the way he dissected the myths, images, and spectacles that shape modern life. In works like The Image and the Americans trilogy, he examined not only the nation's historical development, but also how media, advertising, and celebrity transformed the way people perceive reality itself. Boorstin had a gift for tracing the currents of culture, showing how inventions from the printing press to television reshaped the way societies imagined themselves. He saw both greatness and fragility in American civilization, reminding readers that progress could lead to the most hollow substitutes for reality if not tempered with perspective and wisdom. Sir Stuart Hampshire was also born 111 years ago today, in the shadow of a world about to be torn apart, and grew into one of the most distinctive voices in analytic philosophy after the Second World War. While many of his peers sought certainty in logic or language, Hampshire pushed into the tangled thickets of the human mind and moral choice. He was less interested in tidy systems and more how real people wrestle with conflict, freedom, and responsibility. At Oxford, he stood apart as an anti-rationalist, unwilling to reduce human life to rules or neat categories. His work insisted that philosophy should remain close to experience, the mess of motives, the clash of values, the stubborn fact of freedom. In this, Hampshire helped keep alive a strand of thought that took human beings not as abstract machines, but as actors in a world where decisions matter and must be faced. Sir Stuart Hampshire once summed it up as, "Moral philosophy must never forget that men and women act, not merely reason." On this day in 1958, the United States flipped the sign on the door from committee to agency, and NASA officially began operations. Born from the jolt of Sputnik, built from the bones of the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, and chartered to push beyond military rivalry into civilian exploration. In one sweep, wind tunnel men and flight test engineers were given a mandate as large as the night sky. Learn it, map it, and try not to break the species while doing so. NASA's first years were less about swagger than scaffolding the entire thing, inheriting Langley, Ames, and Lewis, organizing Mercury, then Gemini, then Apollo, and proving that a democracy could coordinate imagination with engineering. The wonder was not just rockets rising, but institutions maturing, procedures written in coffee and calculus, failures met with checklists instead of alibis, and a culture that learned to speak in numbers without forgetting why the numbers mattered. Hopeful? Yes, but hope really does sometimes change the planet and the species. Later on, as President John F. Kennedy was igniting a nation's imagination and drive, he would say, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard." Henry More was born today in 1614 in Grantham, England, and came to be remembered as one of the leading Cambridge Platonists, a circle of 17th century thinkers who sought to defend the reality of the soul and God against the growing tide of mechanistic philosophy. Where Descartes and Hobbes turned minds into machines, More insisted that spirit was more than a clever arrangement of matter, and he advanced a metaphysics that was theistic, idealistic, and deeply resistant to reduction. He wrote extensively on the existence of immaterial substance, the infinity of space as the divine sensorium, and the moral necessity of aligning human reason with a higher order of reality. His stance, neither credulous nor merely reactive, aimed to show that philosophy and faith could still be companions in an age rushing toward empiricism and mechanism. Henry More once put it simply, "To be virtuous is to be happy, and to be vicious is to be miserable." Today in 1918, after years of desert campaigns against the Ottoman Empire, Thomas Edward Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, rode with Arab forces into Damascus. The city had been under Ottoman rule for centuries, and its fall marked a decisive shift in the Great War's Middle Eastern theater. Lawrence, an Oxford-trained archaeologist turned British officer, had become a liaison and strategist for the Arab revolt, guiding irregular troops across brutal deserts, blowing up railways, and weaving alliances among tribes. His entry into Damascus symbolized both triumph and contradiction. Liberation from Ottoman rule on one hand, and on the other, the looming shadow of European colonial ambitions that would soon betray Arab hopes of true independence. Lawrence himself seemed acutely aware of the irony, later reflecting with more disillusion than celebration. T.E. Lawrence, who after all his travels and experience said, "The printing press is the greatest weapon in the armory of the modern commander." And those are some of the things we humans have done over the years. Do the useful thing, say the courageous thing, contemplate the beautiful thing. That is enough. Please follow, like, and subscribe.